Hello and welcome to Agri-History Tropical Edition. In this episode, we'll cover the domestication of sorghum bicolor, better known as sorghum. This crop is a key staple in many ancient Holocene and Neolithic diets, and it's also a mainstay in many African countries. And to that end, there's been a lot of speculation on the origins and domestication of the species. In this episode, we'll cover the origins, domestication, and history of this crop. We will first start with the archaeological history of the species, using a research paper written by Frank Witchell, an independent researcher in 24th Street, Arlington, Virginia, and published in Current Anthropology 2017. This paper utilized pottery remnants as well as grain remnants to showcase the history of this crop. Let's begin. Various sites in the Near East and Eastern Asia have found that sorghum was cultivated in a pre-domesticated form for approximately 2,500 years to 3,500 years. And as such, the earliest forms of sorghum may have come into India by 2000 or 1700 BC in its domesticated form. Sorghum is found in Neolithic areas in Sudan that date between 5000 BC and 3000 BC. And further digs in the Kassala region have shown signs of grain threshing that date to approximately the 4th millennium BC, between 4000 BC and 3001 BC. They've also found ancient samples of sorghum in its domesticated form that date between 3500 BC and 3000 BC in another African region called Kashem el-Gherba. As such, the pre-domesticated forms of cultivated sorghum were likely from Africa, not India. And since domesticated sorghum has been dated to between 2000 and 7000 BC, it is very possible that the idea of a fully domesticated form of sorghum arriving in India is more probable. As such, the evidence seems to suggest an eastern Sudan origin of sorghum, which spread to India and other areas around the world. Now let's talk about the trade routes that were used to spread sorghum to other areas in the world. Now let's talk about the genetics and dissemination of the species. Based on current archaeological evidence, the domesticated form of sorghum bicolor is Sorghum bicolor subspecies Verticillifolium, and there seems to be evidence of heavy selection for smaller grains, much like millets. Another key change that happened in sorghum domestication is, like in all grains, they lost the ability to seed chatter. They also lost the ability to go dormant, although sorghum still relies on cross-pollination, far more than most other crops domesticated in that same area of grain origin. The path of dissemination of sorghum happened as the different tribes in what is now known as Sudan began merging into larger and larger groups. This happened with different local groups of sorghum as well. The merged form of all these populations of domesticated sorghum would be called a Butama group. The likely route of the spread of sorghum is it spread via the Sahelian region, which would allow sorghum to reach a region called the Wadi Hawar, which I may be mispronouncing quite heavily. That region is closely connected to the Nile River, and from there it would spread to the rest of Africa and parts of the Middle East. From there, maritime trade via the Arabian and Red Seas would have allowed for trade between East Asia and India and the rest of Africa. These trade routes have been proposed to be the origin of African cultivars of the Chinese species known as broomcorn millet, and the origin of African crops being grown in China, such as hyacinth bean. As such, this two-way trade may be the origin of Indian cultivars of sorghum. Now let's talk about some land races. Now let's discuss some of the many land races of sorghum. There are 5 distinct races of domesticated sorghum: the bicolor form, the Guinea form, the Caudatum form, the Kaffir form, and the Dura form. The most primitive form is the bicolor form. The most recently developed version of sorghum is the Dura form, which was bred by crossbreeding into another subspecies of sorghum bicolor called Ethiopicum. Others speculate that it may have been bred from bicolor strains that came to India. The Kaffir race was bred from the bicolor race, with some crossbreeding back into sorghum's wild strain. This breed is primarily found in eastern and southern Africa, and is used to make a beer called kefir. Hopefully I'm pronouncing all these names correctly. If I'm not, please let me know. The Caudatum strain was bred directly from the bicolor strain, likely without any other associations. And finally, the Guinea strain was bred from the bicolor, with possible crossbreeding with the wild subspecies Arandinicum. The Caudatum strains are found mostly in East Nigeria to eastern Sudan, and the Guinea form is found mostly in West Africa. Now that the African land races are discussed, let's talk about some of the East Asian ones. This concludes our video on sorghum domestication. Thank you for watching and stay lit fam.